the Middle East. And in this case, the emphasis will be not on the role of the colonial or the new colonial regimes and systems in the world and their puppets and their relationship. But what we will discuss is the role of the three countries that are very influential in the area: Turkey, Iran, and Israel. So someone will come and ask, where is the Arab countries? And we'll discuss this a little later. But actually, the three influential countries in the area who are either independent or semi, who have mostly their ways in some of the issues that are relevant to their national security, are those three countries: Turkey, Iran, and Israel. Unfortunately, in the past 25 years or so, the old regime in the Arab world, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, their role in the Middle East almost diminishes to the point that it does not exist in the case of Syria. It's very minimal in the case of Iraq, and does not exist in the case of Egypt, except when it comes to them acting on behalf of the US in Gaza, or trying to deal with the issue of water coming from Ethiopia. So to start with, what is the population of each country? Iran, well, let's start with the most. Turkey has 92 million inhabitants. Iran has 87 million. And Israel has 10 million. Only 7 of them are Jews. So let's repeat. The population of Turkey is 92 million. The population of Iran is 87 million. The population of Israel is 10 million. Only 7 million of them are Jews. So when we counted the number of people in Israel, this Zionist entity in Palestine, we did not count the people of Gaza or the people of the West Bank. So the non-Jews in this number are about 20% or 25% are Arab Christians and Jews who remain in the 1948 land, and their children and grandchildren, Muslims and Christians again, and few 100,000 Druze, and some others, not large population. What is the GDP of each country? When we talk about GDP, this is the gross domestic product. What is it that the country produces in terms of services and products? Turkey has a $905 billion, followed by Israel with 522 billion, so almost half, followed by Iran with 389 million. Of course, because the sanctions with Iran play a role in the number that we see. In terms of the Sunni population in Turkey, there are about 90% of Turkey are Sunni Muslims. Iran, there is not really a good estimate. It ranges between 5% to 25%. It depends which website you go to. Iran would minimize the number of Sunnis. Some Sunni groups will increase the number, but it ranges between 5 to 25%. But it is, I think, it's less, much less than the 25%. but I'm just quoting because that's what you will see if you do some research. In Turkey, 90% are Sunni Muslims, and in Israel, only 73% are Jews. So this is some information that should give you an idea of the size of each one of those countries in terms of population and GDP. They shared among themselves certain characteristics, and they differ in others that we will discuss. Needless to say that the Middle East is a very important piece of landscape or real estate or countries or land or strategic location, whatever you want to call it, and it will remain for a while. The location, the oil, the population being mostly Muslims, and the attempt of the colonialist and the new colonialist to prevent any emergence of real Islamic state to represent the Muslims. There are some of these factors that will remain there, and we will see this area important for years to come. Not to mention that this Zionist entity that was implanted in Palestine, this cancer that was put in the Muslim land, is there for the Western culture and countries and societies to protect. So this area would remain important and vital and strategic for years to come. In terms of the political, economic, and military and cultural aspect of each of those countries, what we will realize, and let's start with the military part, the three countries have established a military industry. And this is unique in that area. And if you have the will, and of course the money, what would stand on your way? All of us have seen the resistance in Gaza manufacturing simple weapons that they have been using, and they really gave the Zionists hard time with very little means. But if you have this determination, you can do something about your own destiny. So the three countries, Turkey, Iran, and Israel, decided some time ago, when the Arab countries were asleep, that we need a military industrial complex. It will not reach to what's in the US and France and Britain and Russia, but it is very effective in terms of the fact that countries now do look for buying weapons from Turkey, from Iran, and from Israel. So they do manufacture, some of them advanced drones. In fact, the Iranian drones and the Turkish drones played a major role in the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia is buying Iranian drones, and Ukraine is buying Turkish drones. Did you hear of Egyptian drones, or Iraqi drones, or Syrian drones, or Saudi drones, or Algerian drones? Unfortunately, no. In fact, we hear in the resistance in Gaza, basically, that they were able to take some of the drones of the Zionists and use it in this regard. So it's a shame, again, on the countries and the governments and the leadership of the Arab world that they were way behind when it comes to this. Besides the export of weapons, we know that the three countries also import weapons. We have seen during the Gaza war how the Israelis, without the US weapons, they would have really came to an end. Because basically, the US provide them, think of this number, 87,000 tons. The weapons, the explosives that the Israeli used in Gaza from the US, 87,000 tons. There are some of those bombs that are 2,000 pounds each in this regard. So they imported also, the Israelis imported weapons from Germany, from Britain, from France and others in this regard. And there was challenges of should we keep providing them or not. And there were issues even with the Biden administration with those 2,000 pound bombs that the current administration had resupplied and opened the channel again to supply them. So similarly, Iran and Turkey buy weapons. Iran mainly buy weapons from the Russia. Turkey is a NATO country, have usually got weapons that they need above and beyond what they have manufactured from the US and the other members of NATO. But there was a big issue, if you remember, during the time of the Trump administration, when Turkey insisted on buying the defensive missiles from Russia. And NATO threatened Turkey with all sorts of punishments for this, because they said that the Russian would be able to get the Americans' secrets, by being placed in a major NATO country. Remember that Turkey is the largest NATO army after the US in terms of numbers. But Erdogan insisted on buying the Russian system, and basically there were also some thoughts, it's not just to diversify, but to protect against a future coup. That the Americans have access and control on their own weaponry, because they were the one who manufactured them, and they could have put their codes and things that they can control, and they could prevent something from taking place to protect in case of a coup. So Erdogan insisted on getting a Russian system. Iran and Israel, they are not enemies. We have to understand this part. They are not allies, but they are not enemies. In fact, Iran, when it was fighting Iraq, the Israelis sold them weapons. And this is not a claim on the internet. Just go to the congressional record, the Congress in Washington, D.C., and search for Iran Gate. And you will get plenty of those information. The US was providing Saddam with false information, which led to the Iraq losing the FAO area, and the Israelis were providing Iran with weapons. Now somebody may say, oh, because they hate Saddam. Well, that's not the issue. The fact that you will support with this shows that there is some way for them to work together and cooperate on certain aspect in this regard. So both of them have a relationship with the US. Israel, of course, is an illegitimate daughter of this country. It was an illegitimate daughter initially of the British. But Iran has back channels to the US. And the foreign minister of Iran have made it clear, without Iran help, US could not control Afghanistan and Iraq. This is the Iran foreign minister clearly at the time saying, we helped you. We helped you. Without our help, you would not have controlled it. Someone will come and say, oh, because there is some interest for them, there's no doubt about it. But when the US left bulk of Iraq, before they came back with ISIS, they really handed Iraq to Iran, no doubt about this. And when it comes to Lebanon, they did also cooperate in the past many years on forming governments because of the Iran influence in Lebanon. There is no strategic enmity or differences between the US and Iran. All what Iran wants is give me space. Because Iran look at the Gulf countries and do not really have any respect for any of them. Iran said, within days we can take the whole Gulf. I mean, how long would Iran, how long it will take them to take over Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait and UAE and Saudi? Hours? I think no more than hours. It's not days, it's not weeks. It's not weeks. I mean, the Houthis in Yemen, we'll talk about the Houthis. The Houthis in Yemen can take over this whole Gulf countries if the US would not stop them. So from this perspective, Iran came to this conclusion that we need to control, we need our own space, we need to have, we are large countries, we have in the old days, we controlled the Gulf, of course, during the time of the Shah Iran. So we need still to have the same role. And they want to also be able to milk the Gulf countries, just like the US is milking them, and even now the Zionists are milking them, and so on and so forth. But there is not, as I said, a strategic difference between the two. Now, 20 years ago or so, the US paid attention to a very important aspect of the Iranian culture, is the need of Iran for Iran to have nuclear weapons. Khomeini has made a fatwa that, we do not want nuclear weapons. Khomeini came and emphasized it, but they are lying to their bones. They are lying to their bones. Iran is working day and night to have nuclear weapons. So there was a commission that was formed by the US about 25 years ago or so to study this nuclear program in Iran. And it was headed by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the National Security Advisor to President Carter. Of course, this is way after President Carter administration. The report, there was also another co-chair, which have some of the heavyweights in the US, which I read 20 years ago or so. It says in the report that Iran think of themselves, the Iranians are way above Pakistan, that they have deeper history, deeper culture. I'm just quoting what the report says. So how come a country like Pakistan, that they do not have much respect to, have nuclear weapons? India have nuclear weapons and we don't have. That was part of the report that Brzezinski and his team wrote. They said to deal with the issue of Iran and delay the nuclear weapon issue, we should give the Iranian space to have a nuclear program, however civilian. Meaning, let's have reactors, let's produce power, and later on, after X number of years, we'll see how things will go. But it was the US, after that report, who gave the green light for Iran to have a nuclear program. Now, some of you might remember, those who are old enough, that Iran had a project for nuclear reactors by the Germans in the old days during the time of Shah Iran. And Iran paid and Germany built a nuclear reactor in Iran, and then the revolution, Iranian revolution happened, and the German pulled their experts from Iran. So the nuclear reactor was never operating, it was never finished. When the US gave them the okay, Russia stepped in and completed the nuclear program and the reactor and planned for another reactor. And in fact, it's Russian engineers that have done the work, and Russian operators are operating the nuclear plants in Iran. Now, naturally, if you operate a nuclear reactor, even to produce just power, naturally, the bulk of the fuel in the nuclear reactor is uranium-238. And they have uranium-235, which is 2, 3, or 4% to do what? To have the fission, to have the chain reaction. By doing that chain reaction, you are producing plutonium. And if you take the fuel after 18 months of operation, you can separate the plutonium from the uranium, and guess what? Plutonium is a material that can be used for nuclear weapons, just like uranium-235. But uranium-235 is not, present in more than, less than 1% in the wood of the whole uranium. Plutonium is not present naturally. It's being produced in the nuclear reactor. So the two bombs that the US threw on Germany, on Japan, one of them was plutonium, one of them was uranium. So Iran wants to have a nuclear program, operate reactors, produce plutonium. They have some restriction on them, the Russian that is. They may take some of the fuel back or all the fuel back. So they went to the old technology of the 40s of producing material for nuclear weapons using centrifuge technology. And this technology is from the 1940s to 1950s. And in the past year or two, they announced to the world that they have already enriched uranium to 60%. When the Iranians say 60%, say it's 85%. And when you are in the range of 80%, that's material good enough for weapons. So Iran is after this, there's no doubt about it. Israel have nuclear weapons, no doubt about it. Turkey does not have a nuclear program until the past few years that Turkey have signed an agreement with Russia for Russia to build nuclear reactors in Turkey. But even the reactors are not still built. They are being built, they are not finished. They will operate, and there's no doubt in my mind that Turkey eventually would look to have something like this. Now, just for the sake of the complete picture, in the whole Middle East, there was the Israeli reactor that was given to them by the French in the 60s. In the 60s. And the Israelis stole a big ship full of uranium, and that was the base for their program. They were the Iranians reactors that Russia is building after the German stopped, and the new country that have reactors is United Arab Emirates. They have 4 of them. But again, the fuel is provided by the Koreans on the condition that they will take the fuel back to Korea. So that's where the nuclear dimension comes. Now, we said, why do we have to go into this detail? Because that's the problem between Israel and Iran. There is no strategic difference or enmity. All the Israelis want from Iran is one thing: stop the nuclear program. Stop the nuclear program. That's why they were very mad at Obama when he signed an agreement with the Iranians that allow them to do enrichment to a certain level in this regard. The Israelis were very, very mad at Obama, and eventually Trump, of course, did not honor the agreement. So Iranians continue the enrichment. As I said, they are talking about now 80% or so 60, 70, 80% or so that they have in this regard. Now, in terms of political influence, Israel want to dominate the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. That the old theory of this old Zionist Jabotsky and company, who's Netanyahu is one of their students, their thinking is we need to keep beating all our potential enemies and we should have superior power. That's the only way that we can live with the Arabs. Of course, the word Muslims at that point did not exist for them. That those are Arabs, we have to empty Palestine from the Arabs, and we have to be against the Arab countries and so on and so forth. The Islamic dimension came later on with Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Iran and Turkey. But this is something that is recent. If you read the literature from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, all the talk is about Arabs, 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 Arabs. It's only recently, in the past 20 years, that the Islamic dimension start coming to the picture. The political influence, Turkey is competing with Iran where? In the former Soviet republics, the Muslims. Remember, the Soviet Union used to control vast amount of land and population. Many of them were Muslims. Azerbaijan, right? Chechnya, right? Some of them, of course, are Sunni. Azerbaijan is mostly Shiite Muslims in this regard. Some of them are very rich in uranium and other resources. Uzbekistan, close to Afghanistan. So many of those countries from the former Soviet Union who became quote unquote independent, actually they were semi-independent, that Iran and Russia and Turkey are fighting for influence into those countries. Now, the main Shiite country is Azerbaijan. And when Azerbaijan had the fight with Armenia, guess who was on the side of Azerbaijan? Turkey and Israel. And guess who was on the side of the Armenia? Iran. So Armenia is a Christian country. I mean, they do not, hide their feelings about Islam and Muslims and this and that. But Iran was supplying Armenia with weapons. Because Azerbaijan has historically claimed a big part of the land in Iran. And they want to reach to there's a river there, they claim all the land is theirs. So from this perspective, you can see that there is a fight, not an actual, fight on weapons between Iran and Turkey in those former Soviet republics. On the other hand, there is a fight between Israel, Iran, and Turkey over the Arab countries. You have seen, for example, Israel is trying to really normalize with all the Arab countries. Iran is standing on its way. Because again, it's not that Iran have an ideological aspect. It's its interests. And we have talked about this. I mean, when Hezbollah stood and said, we will never have a ceasefire until Gaza has a ceasefire. Trump came, he said, we need to stop the war. Iran immediately ordered Hezbollah to sign. Because Iran wants to show Trump, you can work with us. We have a say. We can make your agenda work. Hezbollah cannot say no to Iran. I mean, by remote control, they run Hezbollah in this regard. And if you have any doubt about this, just Google the name Sheikh al-Tufayli. Tufayli was the first head of Hezbollah. And he still gives talk each week. No, Hezbollah is in Lebanon. Tufail is in Lebanon. No, you are talking about the other Shiite guy who's an agent to the Israelis. What's his name? Husseini, al-Husseini. This is an agent for the Israelis. He was with Hezbollah. They discovered he's an agent, and they sent him to prison for some time. In fact, it was Hassan Nasrallah who put the imma on his head. He was close to Hassan Nasrallah. It turned out he was an Israeli spy. So they want to, put him in jail for a long time or kill him, whatever. Someone has intervened and told them the Saudis will accept him. So now whenever you see an Islamic delegation of the Saudis, suddenly there's a Shiite sheikh there. Who's that? Husseini. He is an Israeli agent, no doubt about it. But they, instead of restraining him, they sent him to the Saudis. Now he's working, clearly talking about normalization with the Israelis and having relation and this and this and that. But we go back to Sheikh Tufaili. Sheikh Tufaili said that I was the head of Hezbollah when it was established. Suddenly, he said there was a fight between Amal, which is another Shiite militia supported by Syria in the old days, and Hezbollah, which was supported by Iran. He said, I ordered the young men not to fight. Shiite should not kill Shiite. Of course, he said even Shiite and Sunni should not kill each other. He is very close to the Sunnis, this Tufaili, Sheikh Tufaili. He said, suddenly, they were not listening to my command. And they told me, oh, by the way, we have a new leader. His name is Hassan Nasrallah, and Iran appointed him. I mean, this is his story. This is his narration. This just shows how things are done in this regard. So Iran was successful in establishing a base in Iraq, and a base in Lebanon, and a base in Yemen. They also have big influence with the Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Palestine, but to a different dimension in this regard. Turkey, with its soft power, is trying to establish also its influence in the Arab countries. We have seen in Libya and Qatar two clear examples. And you can talk about some other examples, but let's talk about Qatar and Libya. What happened in Qatar? So Saudi and the United Arab Emirates decided basically to total boycott of Qatar. And they had their sheikhs, those Salafis, supposedly, scholars for dollars. They paid them, and they start giving fatwa about Qatar, and they need to do this and they need to do that. At one point, they said if Qatar pays X amount of money, we'll just let things go. But they were preparing to invade Qatar. They were preparing to invade Qatar. And the Qatari leadership, the young Amir, realized that the US and the British might not come to his support, because the United Arab Emirates, Saudi, Qatar, and Kuwait, they have major influence from the US and Britain. Britain, because of its historic relationship with those countries, they were the ones who appointed them. Who brought the Al Saud? Al Saud were fighting, right? The Sharif Hussein and Al Saud were fighting for influence. Saudis the British were paying Al Saud, and they were paying Sharif Hussein at the same time. But then decided that the Saudis, and they gave the Sharif children, Jordan and initially Syria, but the French kicked them out, and then put Faisal in Iraq. So they still have some influence in there. So Qatar realized that they might not come to their defense. Now, this is based on what? I really, it's difficult for me to guess, but they reached to this conclusion. Or it might be that the British have advised them, go to Istanbul. Because the British no longer can move a navy like before. The Americans can. So overnight, Hamad will go to Turkey, sign a defense agreement approved by the parliament on the same day, the parliament of Turkey, of course, and the second day, Turkish tanks are all over Qatar. And of course, Saudi and United Arab Emirates gave up. And they are still there. There's a big base for Turkey in Qatar. Although there's also an American base and a British base and what have you, all the, in fact, these days we welcome the bases of the colonialists. They do not need to force us to have it. So the largest American base is in Qatar. But the calculation of the Qatar leadership is that they will not come to their defense. But they can rely on Turkey. And Turkey start having their foot in Qatar, big time. And as a result, Qatar start also supporting the Turkish economy and supporting the Turkish lira and so on and so forth, big investment in Turkey. The second example is Libya. Because when Haftar, who's one of the tools of the Emirates in this regard, and Egyptian also were, pushing him in this regard, and they were on the verge of taking over Libya. When Turkey sent its advisors and the drones, and basically it came to a standstill where Haftar is back in his corner because of the influence of Turkey, and still the Turkish drones and advisors played a major role in limiting the influence of Haftar and his people. Now, I said those two examples, you can elaborate on more. For example, take Somalia. Turkey start establishing the first, Somalia had a war in 1991 that Siad Barre left the country and basically the whole system collapsed. From 1991 until recently, the past maybe 10 years or so, not a single airline will go to Somalia. So Erdogan came with the first Turkish airline with supplies, and it was the first airline to come in Somalia. Turkey started building hospitals, start building manufacturing facilities. And what had happened? A brother who is familiar with the politics of Somalia, he said, if the Turkish government built a school here, UAE come and build the school across the street. If they build the hospital in this neighborhood, UAE come and build the hospital in that neighborhood. Because basically there was this fight over the Africa and Arab countries in this regard. We have seen the potential war that was going to take place between Somalia and Ethiopia last year. And what happened? Erdogan came, made peace between them, although Egypt started sending weapons to Somalia because they want to bother, Ethiopia because of this war over water. But it was Erdogan who took the initiative, brought them together, and eliminated the possibilities of war, at least for now. So you could see this dynamics of those countries starting. Will come, inshallah. That's the how do you say it? That's the golden standard of politics in the last 10 years that I would remember, or maybe more. So in this regard, you see this influence of those countries and the competition between Iran on one side and Turkey on the other side in certain areas, between Turkey and Israel over the Arab words, and between Iran and Israel and the Arab words, and the Turkish dimension, which is recent. In the Arab words, my understanding, with the exception of Palestine, there was not many things that Turkey have done in the Arab worlds. Of course, we said that Libya came later, but I know in Jerusalem, many of the old shops, many of the Islamic sites were renovated and supported. Many organizations, hospitals, schools, what have you, in Turkey, in Jerusalem and Palestine were supported by the Turkish government. I mean, this is a fact. You can go and see many of those shops because the economy in Jerusalem was really battered in the last 10, 15 years or so. So Turkey came to the rescue. This is what they call, the soft power. Same thing with the Turkish movies and Turkish, in fact, the Turkish names are very famous in Palestine in this regard. But we do not know of much of Turkish, for example, influence or work within Egypt, within Iraq, because the Iraq look at Turkey with suspicion because of the Kurdish issue, which is an issue by itself. There are Kurds in Iraq, there are Kurds in Iran, there are Kurds in Turkey, and there are Kurds in Syria. So from a historical perspective, you see this conflict between those three countries, mainly on the Arab and the former Soviet Islamic republics, and Africa in this regard. Now, Brother Hassan was not patient because inshallah we have enough time for this. So basically, the world was shocked with two events in the last year: the events in Gaza and the events in Syria. In Gaza, they started events on, of course, October 7 of 2023 in this regard. And the events in Syria started originally from 2011, where there was a movement against the government in this regard. But last year and the past few weeks were decisive in both cases. And Turkey has something to do with it, Iran has something to do with it, and Israel has something to do with it. So the three countries have big roles in this. Let's start with Turkey. Turkey made a big mistake. Big mistake. In the summer of 2023, Erdogan looked at Turkey and he started thinking that we made a mistake by making enmity with Egypt over Mohammed Morsi, Allah yarhamu, and Rab'a. And we made a mistake also with our vocal and efforts against Israel because the Arab countries are moving toward normalization. And Turkey is the only country, besides, of course, Iran, that is calling Israel names and trying to do something. So Erdogan reached a conclusion that it's over. Let's just normalize with the Israelis. So he shook the hand of Netanyahu. That was the summer of 2023. And he promised Netanyahu to have exchange of visits and strengthening of the relationship. And of course, his popularity in the Arab world have fell sharply then, because they were saying he's the only voice outside of Palestine that support the issue from the Sunni part, because Iran was there too. And suddenly October 7 happened and Erdogan tried to rectify the situation. But it was too late. Too late. Because in fact, he lost a lot in this regard and did not have much to do with what took place. Iran basically is the one who provided the technology some of the weapons and the money and the intelligence to Hamas. That's given, no doubt about it. What we have seen in October 7 is not Hamas made. It's Hamas effort over the years being trained and, coached by the Iranians. In fact, some of the Hamas leaders went, in terms of manufacturing many of these weapons and explosives, they went to Iran. They get training, and some of them went to Lebanon, and they get the training. Same thing with Islamic Jihad. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So Erdogan tried to correct the situation and start being vocal again, strongly vocal against Netanyahu. But of course, he could not explicitly do what Iran was doing in terms of supplying weapons to Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. And then came the Syrian factor. Erdogan tried also to rectify the situation with Bashar al-Assad. And Bashar refused, especially after the Arab countries start welcoming Bashar back to the Arab League and to visit Arab countries. So he visited the United Arab Emirates, and then the foreign minister visited Syria and so on and so forth. So Bashar refused even to talk to him. And in the Islamic conference, tried even to humiliate him. So after a year and a half of Erdogan trying to get Bashar to have some kind of a dialogue with the opposition and talk to him, he refused. And Erdogan started cooking for something big. With the war in Ukraine, and Russia busy with the war in Ukraine, with the October 7 in Palestine, with Iran facing challenges, Turkey realized this is the time. So basically, Turkey was taking care of Syrian armed opposition in the Idlib area. They were protecting them in an agreement with the Russians. There was an agreement between Turkey and Russians to have those under the protection of Turkey on Syrian land, where we have millions of Syrians who left to Turkey, and Syria, Bashar al-Assad will not accept even to discuss them or the opposition. So Turkey had made the arrangements on the political level, on contacts with the Western countries, with some of the Arab countries, in preparation for the fall of Bashar al-Assad. And you can understand this is clearly when Erdogan said, Hama, Homs, and next will be Damascus. I mean, the statement was clear if anybody has any doubts. And in terms of, getting the leader, Shara, who used to be called Abu Muhammad al-Julani. I mean, it's interesting. Abu Muhammad al-Julani was a member of ISIS, then a member of Al-Qaeda. Then he have his own organization. And now he ended up to be the president of Syria. This is Turkish work. Without Turkish work, nothing would have taken place. Yes, it was the Syrian young men who sacrificed their lives and fought very hard in some areas, but the thinking, so this is really a very good example of Turkey defeating Iran and Israel in Syria. And they are the ones who are still talking about a military agreement, defense agreement between between Syria and Turkey. And the Israelis are alarmed. Because there is no land between the Zionist entity and Iran or Turkey. Between Turkey and Iran, there's borders and there's competition. And there is lack of trust that goes back to the time of the Ottomans. I mean, the Ottomans have stopped the expansion of Shiism in the Muslim world. Without the Ottoman influence, the Muslim world would have become Shia. There's no doubt about it. In Syria, in Egypt, and beyond, the change was massive. And it was the Ottomans who came and flipped this whole thing and put the influence of Shiism within Iran. And they fought, Iran and the Ottomans fought many fights. If you read a book, it's talking about, the decline of the Muslim, empire and civilization during the time of the Ottomans. In this regard, the book is called What Went Wrong? What Went Wrong? In the book, there are letters that are signed by the Shah of Iran or Persia at the time, talking to the European leaders. You are crazy. Why you fight among each other when your enemy and our enemy is one, the Ottomans? We should cooperate to fight the Ottomans. I mean, those are letters, and they have the copy of them in there. So there is this lack of trust historically between Iran and Turkey, but they have lots of interests together. For example, the US put a stop on the Iranian using the banking system through the SWIFT, because the US controlled the SWIFT system. So what had happened? Trucks full of pure gold will drive from Tehran and other places and go where? To Istanbul. And give them the gold so Iran can buy the goods from outside of Iran. I mean, this is not secret. I mean, the US know this and they try to put sanctions. Turkey said, do whatever you want. We are not going to go back on this. That's how, Iran was able to break the sanctions. As I said, the trucks full of pure gold. Give them to Turkey, and Turkey will pay for the equipment and supplies and whatever Iran needs. So it's the mutual interest in this regard is also there, beside the mistrust. Anyway, that's also a historic subject. It's beyond, us. There are two quick points that I want to mention in this regard. On the internet, you see some people talking about the great power that is in the Middle East of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia neither is great nor it's a power. The Houthis can take over Saudi within a few days if the US would not stop them. Saudi does not have a real army. They started a war against Yemen and they could not conduct it. They had to borrow soldiers and pay for them $5,000 a month from Sudan and other areas. And they still eventually had to stop this war and trying to make a deal with the Houthis, which should be a lesson to anyone who thinks Saudi is a power in this regard. However, there's a snake in the Middle East called United Arab Emirates. الإمارات or المؤامرات العربية المتحدة. Imarat, they are the snake in the Middle East. They have some money. They are disrupting. They are cooperating, and they are allies of the Zionists. No doubt about it. We have seen their influence in overthrowing Mohammed Morsi, Allah yarhamu. There's no doubt about it. It was the influence of them, plus little coming from Saudi. We have seen their effort in Libya. We have seen their effort in Somalia. We have seen their effort in Syria. I mean, they were among the most delayed with the Sisi to congratulate the Syrians on what had happened. So basically, they are really hate the guts of this deen, al-Islam, and of anyone who calls for Islam. And they want the Arab world and the Muslim world to turn their way so that Dubai can be anywhere. Their culture can be anywhere. And when it comes to the Muslims, they cannot hate. They cannot hide their enmity. In fact, when you saw the great victory that Allah blessed the people of Gaza, you start seeing their tools talking about this as if, what are you talking about? I mean, the enmity, they cannot even hide it. And the last issue that I want to mention in 1 minute is this Yemeni phenomenon. Yemen have proven to be the only Arab country that made a big difference in the last year in the Middle East. They said basically we're going to block Bab al-Mandab, because Bab al-Mandab, it's a corner, and Yemen has that corner. And they said, we will not allow an Israeli ship to pass, we will not allow an American ship to pass, we will not allow this. And they were true to their word until the last minute. They said, we will never stop until the war on Gaza stops. That's a big difference between Yemen and Iran and Hezbollah. Because Yemen, they took it as a matter of principle. Now, some people say, oh, Yemeni Houthis want to have some influence. Yeah, there's a government, another government in Yemen. Nobody knows about it. It's a Saudi tool. Have not much of an influence in this regard. But this Houthi phenomenon really need to be studied. I mean, despite the fact that the Israeli will send 100 planes to destroy Hudaydah and other places, major destruction, the second day, another missile in the heart of Tel Aviv. Day after, another missile in the heart of Tel Aviv. And the Israelis kept running to the shelters. They said, we will stop the bombing when the war in Gaza stopped. As I said, they were really true to their word. And they made a big difference. No doubt about it. The Israeli economy suffered because of Yemen. The Israeli harbors, who used to deal with billions of dollars, they became idle. Because there is no ships that can come from China and other places through the Red Sea. If they come into Israel, the Yemeni says you cannot pass. They have to go all the way around all of Africa and go back to Jabal Tariq and come back to the Mediterranean and come back, which no company would be willing. I mean, this was extra expense. So unfortunately, the traitors among us, Muslims, Saudi, UAE, and Jordan start supplying the Israelis with the supplies. So tons and tons of material each day would be dropped in Abu Dhabi, coming from China and other places, taken in thousands of trucks through Saudi Arabia to Jordan and to the Zionists. And you have seen few examples. The Huwaitat is one of them, who took a pistol, hid it under the truck, under the seat. When the Israelis came to inspect him, he killed the three of them at the border. What he was carrying? The supplies from the Emirat. Or, of course, some of them were carrying fruits and vegetables from Jordan, because although in Palestine it's rich land, but no one is to cultivate it. So it was really rotten in the land because the Palestinians were prevented from working in Israel, and the people from Thailand have left after the war. It's 9 o'clock, so I am really sorry that I could not have a time more than one question or comment, and then we will need to conclude, inshallah. One question or a comment, whatever. Yes? Brother, in fact, there was a thinking that the Israelis initially want the Emiratis to come and run Gaza. And they put it, actually, Israel announced that the UAE have agreed to this. And the Emiratis were very furious. They came and said, no, no, we did not make that agreement. Basically, the Israelis want the Emirati intelligence, or lack of, to go to Gaza and get the secrets of the tunnels. Make no mistake, and establish agents. That's why, they keep saying, we can work with the Egyptians, with the Qataris. They keep saying Emirati, 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 because they are the ones who will do the bidding of the Zionists. Jazakum Allah khair for being good listeners. May Allah bring the khair and the good for the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and give hidayah to the Muslims. And Jazakum Allahu khair wa barakallahu fikum jami'an. Assalamu alaikum.